Hello everyone, this is Mei Xin. You are watching channel EMI brought to you by the Center for Academic Literacy here at NTNU. Today, we have a rather bizarre sounding top story. EMI teachers seek better clarity. Now, whoever wrote that headline also needs better clarity. What does it even mean? Clarity in what? Well, I, for one, find this headline extremely unclear. So we'll need our trusty field reporter to clarify what it means. So Anthony, over to you.
Hi everyone, this is Anthony reporting from Classroom Poo 101 of NTNU. With me today, I have EMI teacher Ruben. How you doing? Welcome back.
Hello, Anthony. It's good to be back.
It is. Now, Ruben, can you tell me more about the issues of EMI teachers seeking better clarity?
Yes, we hope to be clearer.
That's it?
That's it.
I'm gonna have to guess what that means. Are you talking about eyesight? Do you need glasses? Carrots? A blue light filter on your laptop?
No, that's not it. Students have told me that I can be clearer. Today, we're going to be talking about nutrition. Who can tell me what's important in a balanced diet?
Lots of vegetables.
Good. Do you know why?
No.
We need to eat lots of vegetables because they're important for our health.
Prof, that doesn't explain much. Do you mind elaborating more?
All right, here it goes. Vegetables are important because they are rich in compounds like flavonoids, carotenoids, and glucosinolates. Any questions?
Where should we even begin?
It's so clear now. I understand. It's clear you have rich domain knowledge. You're a professor. You've studied this forever. I get it.
I have.
You just need help talking about it and sharing your knowledge in a way the students can understand, right?
That's exactly it.
Great. In this scenario, it seemed like you began with too simple of an explanation. Then you went to the other extreme in attempts to elaborate more.
Can you give me some advice on how to explain and clarify concepts more clearly?
That's what we're here for. I shall now pass the mic back to Mei Xin at the studio. She will give us some suggestions on expressions and phrases that you can use to clearly explain your concepts.
Thank you, Anthony and Ruben, for highlighting this issue. Ruben's experience is a common challenge in EMI teaching. How to explain complex ideas clearly. Let's explore some strategies on how to improve. Now, we will provide you with some scaffolds that can help you explain and clarify ideas to curious students. You'll be surprised by how simple these sentences can be and that you don't need big words to explain big ideas. Defining key terms. When we write essays, we often start with definitions of key terms in order to ensure that our readers and we are on the same page. Similarly, when we teach, we also want to make sure of that. Below are a few sentence structures we can use to define key terms. Typically, we would use them when we introduce a new concept to the students. This term refers to the definition of something is. This idea is typically defined as. This idea can be broadly defined as. I will first start with the definition of something. For example, in the business field, you might define market segmentation as the process of dividing a market of potential customers into groups or segments based on characteristics such as demographics, needs, priorities, common interests, and other psychographic or behavioral criteria. Or, as an example closer to the hearts of humanities teachers, social constructivism is the theory that human development is socially situated and knowledge is constructed through interaction with others. The idea of providing a definition is simple enough, as anyone with a textbook can do that. However, the last thing we want to do is simply read from the textbook or sound like a robot. Now, what can we do after offering our students a definition of key terms? In other words, how can we build on textbook definitions to explain something in a way that students can understand? I've actually just demonstrated the idea of how to do so when I said "in other words." That's right, we're talking about paraphrasing and explanation. I'm going to hand the time over to Anthony, who will be taking us through this technique.
Paraphrasing. Paraphrasing refers to putting an idea into different words. In the context of paraphrasing and explanation, paraphrasing refers to using different and usually simpler words to present the same idea. Common ways to introduce a paraphrased idea are, in other words, to put it simply, to put it another way. Another way to say this would be, when you paraphrase, keep in mind your audience's comprehension and language level. Textbook definitions and explanations are usually quite technical and do not sound like spoken language. When we paraphrase a definition, we want to use our own words in a way that our students can easily understand. Having said that, paraphrasing does not mean dumbing down the content, making it easier. Rather, it's a way to make ideas accessible to learners. You are definitely not insulting your students' intelligence by paraphrasing your explanation. Here's an example. If you are a teacher in medical school, you probably have to introduce different conditions in various classes. Say you have to explain what sarcoidosis means. Here's the textbook definition. Sarcoidosis is an inflammatory disease characterized by the formation of small clumps of inflammatory cells called granulomas in various organs, most commonly the lungs and lymph nodes. Hearing this, your students might still not get what the condition does exactly. So you might paraphrase it this way. Sarcoidosis is the condition where the body's defense systems get a bit confused and overreact, causing small clumps of cells to build up in places like the lungs and lymph nodes. These clumps don't belong there, and over time, they can make it harder for those parts of the body to work properly. Already better, right? Well, guess what? To make your explanation even more dummy-proof, not saying that your students are dummies, we can also add another approach to our explanation, which is using an analogy. I'm done talking, and I want Mei-Xin to take my place with her beautiful voice.
Using an analogy. Analogies make concepts easier to understand since they link what is unfamiliar, which is the new concept, to what is familiar to the listener. In this way, you allow the audience to form quick connections, thus lighting up those light bulbs in their heads. A few common ways to introduce analogies are, think of it like this. This idea is like that idea in that. Imagine this idea as something. You can think of this idea like something else. You can think of something in another way, which is, to continue the same example of sarcoidosis, an explanation involving an analogy can go like this. Think of sarcoidosis like a neighborhood watch that mistakenly identifies harmless visitors as intruders. The watch group, your immune system, starts setting up roadblocks, granulomas, all around to stop those harmless intruders. But because there was no real threat in the first place, these roadblocks end up blocking regular movements and activity, causing problems for the neighborhood, or in this case, your organs, in the long run. As a quick illustration of how you might apply the same idea in different fields, consider the following. The Industrial Revolution was like a tidal wave reshaping societies. Climate change is like a ticking time bomb. So, teachers, go ahead and unleash your creativity. Who knows, you might have a light bulb moment and come up with a brilliant analogy that's not only interesting, but also informative. Before we move on, let's have a quick recap of our 3 approaches to providing a clear explanation. 1. Defining key terms. 2. Paraphrasing. And 3. Using an analogy. Feel free to experiment with these ideas Mix and match them, and watch your students' faces light up in excitement at gaining new knowledge. Clarifying. Explain again, but in more detail. Now, for all our attempts at providing students with great explanations, we might not have been as clear as we thought we were, or some students might have been distracted by a meme their friends sent them and missed out on your explanation. Although what you would probably like to do is to move on and ignore these students who may occasionally lose focus, the kindness of your heart just won't allow you to. So you try to clarify a point you made earlier. We've all been there, on both sides of the podium actually. I myself have been guilty of catching up on my social media feed during more than one class. Sorry, teachers. So when this happens, I would really appreciate it when my teachers clarify what they explained earlier in ways such as these. To clarify, what I mean is, let's break it down. Let's go through this step by step. Let's unpack this complex term. To give you a better idea of something, thanks for pointing out where I have been unclear. Let me explain this in more detail. Notice that in these sentences, the person doing the explaining is basically breaking the issue down into smaller parts or going into more detail to help their audience understand what they're talking about more easily. So, teachers, if you could try out these sentences to help your students better understand a certain concept, I'm sure they will appreciate it a lot, even if they don't tell you that directly. As we know, Taiwanese students tend to be shy, but it doesn't mean they don't love you. Speaking of love, what do Taiwanese students love? They would love for Anthony to come back here with his language pointer of the day. Welcome, Anthony!
Language pointer, turning written text into spoken words. In today's language pointer, I'd like to discuss the idea of paraphrasing a little more. To be more specific, let's think about how to paraphrase written text into spoken language, like when you need to turn a textbook definition into a couple sentences that your students can understand easily. What are some techniques you use? To make it easier for you, we will present the examples of an explanation of sarcoidosis from earlier. Read through these explanations again and try to see how they differ from each other. Textbook definition. Sarcoidosis is an inflammatory disease characterized by the inflammation of small clumps of inflammatory cells called granulomas in various organs, most commonly the lungs and lymph nodes. Paraphrased version. Sarcoidosis is a condition where the body's defense system gets a bit confused and overreacts, causing small clumps of cells to build up in places like the lungs and lymph nodes. These clumps don't belong there, and over time, they can make it harder for those parts of the body to work properly. Many guidebooks talk about how written language has a more formal register than spoken language, but that's not very easy to understand. At least for my tiny brain. Machine wrote the script. What exactly does formal mean? Thus, we are not going to go there. Instead, we will focus on just two simple aspects: sentence length and word difficulty. Basically, written language usually features longer sentences and uses more difficult words, whereas spoken language usually contains shorter sentences and simpler words. The table below provides a summary. So, the next time you need to paraphrase a difficult explanation for your students, try out these pointers. If you feel that you need more practice before having the confidence to perform this feat on the spot in class, you can also roleplay or script their lessons in advance before the class. Practice makes perfect.
Well, before we go back to the classroom to see Ruben's improvement, here's a quick recap of some of the things you can do to make sure that you explain important ideas to students clearly. Strategies for good explanations include defining key terms, paraphrasing, and using an analogy. Clarifying refers to explaining again, but in more detail.
For our language pointer today, we talked about a specific way to apply the idea of paraphrasing, which is turning written text into spoken words. To do this, you can break up long sentences into shorter ones or replace difficult words with simpler ones. What better way to test out the effectiveness of these strategies than actually trying them out in class?
Today, we're going to be talking about the importance of protein in our diet. First, let's define what protein is. According to your textbooks, protein is a macromolecule essential for the structure, function, and regulation of the body's cells, tissues, and organs. Well, that means that protein is a substance in foods like meat, beans, and eggs that helps our bodies grow and stay strong. It also helps repair our muscles, organs, and cells.
Oh.
Yeah, okay. You can also think of protein like the building blocks of a house. Just like how bricks or blocks create strong walls and structures, protein help build and repair the muscle, tissues, and organs in our body.
Okay.
All right.
Prof, I swear I read the textbooks 5 times yesterday and I did not understand the definition of protein. But after you explained it, it all makes sense now. Thank you, Prof.
I'm so glad to hear that.
Try these strategies in your next EMI class and see how your students respond. We'd love to hear your experiences.
Do practice these expressions in your own time with Sensei, our powerful AI-powered platform. Speaking of AI, did you know that AI stands for artificial intelligence? That means the computer is kind of, like thinking on its own. And
Okay, Anthony, I'm gonna stop you there. Explaining is good, but please don't over-explain. So, in the next and final video, we are going to talk about a few ways to end the class effectively. Stay tuned and see you around.